is not the one being looked at like something about to be eaten." "Whenever the market is here, so am I," Mr. Maxillium said warmly. He flicked a few sections of his cane, lining up a row of silver symbols, and pointed it at Billy again. "You might not." The shining formal shoes vanished. Billy's battered boots and pants and raincoat were back in a flash, looking dirtier than ever. He glanced up, but the chair in front of him was empty. Across the market laneway, an impossible distance to walk in such a short time, the career magician was lifting the pea trooper to their feet. The girl at Cole's bookstore stood up, smoothing her gown, and looked at Billy with dismay. "It took you long enough." Like him, she spoke in the blended accent of local kids. "Next time, tell him no." Billy looked about, hoping to brush the girl off by pretending his siblings needed him, but Ella was still absorbed in her reading, and there was no sign of Frankie yet. "I don't remember asking you, Miss Humbug." Her dark brown eyes widened. That had probably come across quite rude. "I didn't mean humbug as in nonsense," Billy said quickly. "Humbug like the lollies, because you've got stripes." The girl suddenly beamed. "You're the first person to get it." "I am. When Aunt Lizzie and I made this dress, a humbug is exactly what I wanted it to look like." She showed him a handful of unravelled wool. "I'm glad I let that pig off the leash. He would have got you otherwise." "You magicked the rope undone," Billy realised aloud. "You are articulating. You pulled apart your knitting, and the knot on the rope." "That isn't what I meant it for, but when I saw how close you were taking the deal, I had to throw all that work away, refocus everything into a new spell, and release the pig." She shoved the wool into a satchel across her shoulder. "You really have no idea who that was." "Should I?" The girl glanced around them and noticed the obscure smith in the lane. "Oh dear, he spotted poor Miss McKay again. Better her than you, I suppose." The girl took a long loop of green wool out of her bag. "Come closer." "Hang on," said Billy. "I have no idea who you are either." "I'm Kezia." She was weaving a complicated pattern with the loop between her fingers, like a figure in a game of cat's cradle. Billy wasn't sure what to make of her. She looked East Asian with her light brown skin and gloss black hair, but she spoke like she'd been born in Australia, dressed like she was going to a high tea party, and had a name that belonged in a fancy girls' grammar school. "Kezia who?" "Nobody." "Rubbish! Your parents didn't name you Kezia Nobody." She didn't reply, but threw one loop over Billy's head and one over her. "All right, Kezia Nobody, what's the string for?" All at once, the noise of the marketplace died away. The shouts became indistinct, the footsteps of the crowd reduced to a dull rumble. It was as if he put his head under water. But though his hearing had gone wrong, his voice was clear. "It lets us talk in secret," said the girl, glancing around them to be sure it was working. "People can't hear us, and we can't hear them, but you and I can hear each other." "Tell me your real name," Billy said, wrapping the magic string tight around a finger. "Or I'll break it." "Tell me yours." "Billy Pike." "Properly William, then?" "Yeah, but it's only when I'm in trouble." "Helmet and spears," she said. "Very good." "What are you talking about?" "You've got a theme in your name," said Kezia Nobody. "A pike is a big spear. One of your ancestors must have been a soldier. William comes from Wilhelm, helmet. So, you're helmet and spear." "Oh." Billy had always considered his name a bit bland, but Kezia made it sound fierce and impressive. "I thought a pike was a fish." "The weapon came first," she said. "Mind you, even fish would be better than nobody. I'd even take Barrett or Cameron. That's fraud and crooked nose." Billy tightened the string between his fingers. "You expect me to believe nobody is your actual name?" "No," she said bitterly. "It's what I'm calling myself until I find out my real one." "Were you a foundling?" "I could be," said Kezia. "That's the problem. I don't know. My mother and father might be in prison, or dead, or living on my street. For all I know, Aunt Lizzie and Aunt Laura could have picked me off a cinnamon tree. That's what Kezia means, anyway. Cinnamon tree. I don't think they're really my aunties, because we don't look much alike. But I don't know, because they can't tell me." "Well, that's very sad," Billy said, a bit carelessly. "But what's it got to do with me? That man you were talking to did something to my parents. She pulled her long black hair away from one side of her face. "And here's what he did to me." Billy flinched. The side of her head was blank. Her hairline surrounded nothing but flat skin. "It was a few years ago," Kezia said. "I'd heard what he was like, but I didn't really know. He gave me all these hints that he knew something about my past. Said he knew it inside out and backwards. I tried to resist. I really did. But when the temptation got the best of me, he said, 'So you're finally ready to lend me your ear.'" Billy forced himself to look at her face again and not stare at the smooth place where her ear should have been. "But that's just an expression. That's what I thought too. Then my ear was gone, and he was telling me the story backwards. By the time I realized that Len Denaeth was the end, he was halfway through, and I couldn't keep track." Kezia let her hair fall. "The thing you ought to know about the Obscurusmith is that he can't lie. You can't trust anything he says either. He gives you exactly what he promises, in exactly the way you don't want. Like the meanest Jim Crilly you could possibly imagine," said Kezia Nobody. "And we got off lightly. People come to my auntie's stall, asking after him. That's the dressmaker's stall on Little Collins side." Billy knew it. It explained her impressive gown. "Miss Brooks and Miss Garland?" He avoided using the name most people used, the spinsters. Her aunts were probably sensitive about never having found husbands to look after them. "That's us." Kezia lowered her voice even more. "I see it all the time. One day, someone is their usual self. The next, they've changed. They're gorgeous. They're rich. They're happy. Then it all goes wrong. They go missing, or the money burns their fingers, or whatever was changed to make them pretty gets stretched out of shape. They tell you they need to see him, and that's when he's nowhere to be found." It sounded absurd. Billy couldn't ignore Kezia's missing ear, but for all he knew, she could have been born without it. She might have somehow magicked it off herself. "Why didn't you tell the coppers?" "I did. When it comes to this place, they're useless. If your pocket watch is stolen, your only hope of seeing it again is if someone tries to sell it back to you. I've seen policemen cross the street to avoid Paddy's Market. To them, we're not worth it. Convicts and children of convicts." That, at least, Billy could believe. It had only been 3 years since Britain had dumped its final shipment of outcasts as far away as it could send them. He twanged the green string and thought. "He said he could help me." "He's able to," said Kezia, "but I promise you, he won't. However bad you think your family's nail factory is, my family doesn't own it. It would have been a very different life if they had. My dad does paperwork in the office, and they need another person on the packing line." "Good," Kezia said. "If they don't own it, then they won't be too cross at you for finding some other job. You were applying to work for Mr. Cole before, weren't you?" Billy looked at his favourite stallholder, who was now busy trying to serve 2 customers at once. "I think he wants someone older. Try other shops. Try being a farmer, like you said. Take the job in the factory, then do nothing until they give you the sack." That was bound to reflect badly on his father. "I'll put in a good word for you to Mr. Cole," she went on. The sounds of the market returned as she lifted the string off them both. "Just don't let that creature sell you anything. It always costs more than it's worth." Before Billy could decide what to say, his sister appeared at his side. "Frankie's here!" In the lane, Frankie Pike struggled under the burden of an overflowing crate. There was time for one more question. "That thing you were making," Billy said to Kezia, though Emma was already tucking his hand. "What kind of spell were you trying to do before you used it to untie the pig?" Kezia Nobody glared up in the market rafters at a single black and white pigeon. "I'm making net."